Hi there, my name is Yasmin and I am a tutor here at Tutor Impact. Now, today we are going to be learning all about global biomes. Now, don't worry if you've never heard this word before. We'll be learning what a biome is and what the main ones are today. Now, yeah, as I said, you're probably wondering what is a biome, and it's something that you might not have heard before, or you might have heard before and not know much about it. But in essence, a biome is a large area characterized by its vegetation, its soil, climate, and wildlife. So, what lives in each biome depends on how warm or cold it is, how dry or wet it is, how fertile the soil is. So, it's all about what is going on in that particular area. Now, animals in a biome depend on plants for food, but plants in a biome also often depend on the animals for spreading pollen and seeds so that new plants can grow. So both plants and animals rely heavily on each other to stay alive. And you can also look at my video on ecosystems to learn more about this process. But in essence, a biome is a large area characterized by its vegetation, its soil, climate, and wildlife. We're now going to move on to look at some of these in context and look at some examples just to put it, as I said, in a bit more context for you. So this is a world map, and you can see here, as the key shows, that there are lots of different biomes across the world. So each color matches up with a different area on the map. So you can see that across the diagram we see here, there is a big variety of colors, and that's because the biomes across the world all are very different, and it really depends on the conditions in a particular place. So for example, we have the tundra up here in the northern hemisphere, just in the top above Canada, and that's because it's really cold. We'll go into the specific examples next, but the temperature difference is often a very big factor in these different biomes. So we can see up here that there's a tundra area, which is very cold. And then in comparison to that, on the equator and around the equator, we can see this brown area here, which is arid desert, and that is much, much hotter. So temperature is a factor, as we looked at before. And this causes some very different conditions in these particular areas. Now we're going to move on to, I think it's the five, main types of biome. So we have the tropical rainforest, we have the deserts, we have the woodlands, we have the grasslands, and we have the tundra. Now I'm going to quickly outline each one before we go into a bit more detail. So rainforests, they're hot and wet all year round. So very hot, very wet. So lots of rain, lots of heat, sort of in the name of rainforest there. They're home to half of all the different types of plant animals on the planet. So they're very, very diverse locations. So they're home to half of all the different types of plants and animals in the whole of Earth. So that's the rainforests. Then we also have the deserts. So deserts are hot, but they are dry all year round. So in contrast to the rainforest, where it's very hot and very wet, the deserts are very hot and very dry. And the only things that grow in deserts are cacti and small shrubs, because the soil is very shallow and rocky, and the animals only come out at dusk when it's cooler. So it's hard for plants to grow in this environment. Now, the next one we have there is grasslands. So grasslands are areas of land that are vast and open, with grasses being the main plants. Again, it's bit in the name there. The largest grasslands are found in East Africa, and you see animals such as zebras, giraffes, elephants, and rhinos. They're all found in grassland locations. The next one we'll look at is woodlands. So woodlands are habitats where the main plants found are trees. But plants such as mosses, ferns, and lichen can also be found in these areas. And the climate is warm and mild, with more rain falling in the winter than the summer. And if you live in the United Kingdom, this is probably the biome you're most familiar with. The last one we'll look at is tundra. As I mentioned before, when we looked at the map, these are the coldest of all of the biomes. So they're found usually at the very top and the very bottom of the planet, where it's the coldest. There's very little rain or snow, and the temperatures are freezing, really cold. Winters are long and summers are short. And because of how the temperatures are, part of the soil is frozen all year round. Although the top parts defrost in summer and plants such as mosses can grow. So sometimes in the summer when it gets a bit warmer, mosses can grow, but most of the time that land is frozen over. Now, as I said, we're now going to look into the different biomes here in a bit more detail. So we're going to start with the tropical rainforests. So as you can see from this map, it's showing you where the areas of tropical rainforests are found mostly. So you can see that it's very much along this sort of line along the middle of the map, particularly in South America there. But there are two types of rainforests. We are focusing here mainly on tropical rainforests, but rainforests can also be called temperate rainforests. Tropical rainforests, as you can see here, are found closer to the equator, whereas temperate rainforests are found far more north in coastal areas. And the majority of common houseplants can also be found from the rainforest. So if you have a plant in your house, it's likely that that might have come from a rainforest, as they're a big source of plants. As we said before, they house over half the plant and animal species in the world. Now, the tropical rainforest is a hot and moist biome where it rains all year long. And the biome itself is known for its dense canopies of vegetation that form 3 different layers. So the tropical rainforest is known to be split into sort of 3 areas. Now, these layers are the top layer, the middle layer, and the bottom layer. But they're also known as the canopy, understory, and floor. So that top layer I just said was the canopy, the second layer is the understory, and that bottom layer is the floor. So it's got 3 main areas. And the top layer, the canopy, as I just said, contains giant trees. So this is the top of the biome. And this layer of vegetation prevents much of the sunlight from reaching the ground. So it's called a canopy, and you can sort of visualize that a bit because it's sort of at the top and it covers all the light. Just as I'm blocking the light from reaching my face now, it covers that light from reaching the plants at the bottom of the rainforest. And after that canopy, we then have the middle layer, which is called the understory, and that's made up of vines, smaller trees, ferns, and palms. So much smaller plants feature underneath this top canopy. And then the bottom layer, called the floor of the rainforest, is covered with wet leaves and leaf litter. A few plants are actually found on the floor of the forest due to the lack of sunlight we talked about before. However, the hot, moist atmosphere and all the dead plant material create really good conditions for bacteria and other microorganisms to thrive. So it provides quite a good environment for those sort of microorganisms and bacteria on the bottom floor. So we have the top layer, the canopy, the middle layer, the understory, and the bottom layer, or the floor. And those make up the tropical rainforest. The next one we're going to be looking at are deserts. As I said before, these are also very hot, but instead they are quite dry as opposed to wet with the rainforest. And they are the driest of all of the biomes. And the most fundamental characteristic really of the desert is that it receives very little rainfall. So in contrast to the rainforest, which gets lots of rain, the desert gets hardly any rain at all, and it only gets 10% of the rain that a rainforest gets. So much, much less rain falls in the desert. Now, the temperatures in deserts can change drastically from day to night, and that is because the air is so dry that heat escapes rapidly at night. So the daytime temperatures averages around 38 degrees, while in some deserts it can get as cold as -4 degrees at night. So that's an absolutely massive difference. That's a potential range of 42 degrees between daytime and nighttime. And since these desert conditions are so severe, the plants that do live there need adaptations to compensate for the lack of water. And some plants, such as cacti, store water in their stems and use it very slowly, while others, like bushes, conserve water by growing few leaves or having large root systems underneath the ground to preserve and gather water. So those are the deserts. The next one we're looking at are grasslands. And again, you can see where these feature most frequently on the map. So grasslands are generally open and continuous, sort of fairly flat areas of grass. The height of this grass correlates with the amount of rainfall it receives, and this varies between different areas. Tropical grasslands have dry and wet seasons that sort of remain warm all the time, whereas there's also a different type of grassland, as with rainforest, called temperate grasslands, which have cold winters and warm summers with rain. The grasslands die back to their roots annually, and the soil and the sod protects those roots and the new buds from the cold of winter or dry conditions. There are a few trees that may grow in this sort of biome along the streams, but many don't do this because of the lack of rainfall. So if there are trees around this biome, it's usually near where there's a source of water because the rain isn't as frequent as other biomes. Now, the next biome we're looking at are the woodlands. So the woodlands, deciduous woodlands, are located in sort of mid-latitude areas, which means they're found between the polar regions and the tropics. So as you can see from their map, you can sort of see how these are either further north or further south than the sort of areas we've looked at before in the last few examples. The temperature varies widely from season to season, with cold winters and hot, wet summers. During autumn, trees change colour and then lose their leaves. You might have experienced this yourself when you've seen the trees in winter losing their leaves. And this is preparation for the winter season. Because it gets so cold, the trees have adapted to winter by going into a period of dormancy over the winter. And they also have thick bark to protect them from the cold weather. In contrast, the trees flower and grow during the spring and summer. So this is more of the growing season for these plants. So woodland really varies depending on the time of year. And the last biome we're looking at today is the Arctic tundra. And as I said before, these feature very, very north and very, very south. And you can really see this from this map. They're the coldest of biomes, and they really receive low amounts of water and precipitation from rain, which makes the tundra quite similar to a desert in some ways. The tundra is found in regions just below the ice caps of the Arctic, but it extends across North America to Europe and Siberia in Asia. Much of Alaska and about half of Canada are also in the tundra biome. Tundra is also found at the tops of very high mountains elsewhere in the world. So it's not always capped to these sort of top and bottom areas, but it has to be very high up because temperatures are extremely cold. But to be fair, they can get a bit warmer in summer, but they're generally very, very cold. And they're even so cold that there is a layer of permanently frozen ground below the surface, and this is called permafrost. So to recap today, we've looked at a couple of types of biomes. And if you remember from the start, we said that a biome is a large area characterized by its vegetation, soil, climate, and wildlife. And we've seen 5 key examples of different biome. We've had the tropical rainforests, which are hot and wet all year round. We have the deserts, which are hot and dry all year round. So they're similar, those two, but one's really wet, one's really dry. We then have the grasslands, which are areas of land that are very vast and open, with grasses being the main plant. We also then have the woodlands, which are the habitats where the main plants are found are trees. But as I said, mosses, ferns, and lichen can also be found in these areas. And then the last type of biome that we've looked at today is the tundra, which is the coldest of all of the biomes we've spoken about today. And we also discussed how there's very little rain or snow, and the temperatures are also very, very cold. So it's similar in terms of the dry sense to the desert, but the temperatures are flipped in this instance. Now, I hope this has given you a good insight into what a biome is and some examples of what biomes are. There is obviously a lot more information out about this area. And as you will have seen from the first map, there's more than just these 5 types of different biomes, but these are the biggest ones and the most important ones on our planet. So I hope this has been useful, and I really hope you enjoyed the rest of your day. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.